Over the last 3 years, I've had plenty of time to think of two difficult and searching questions of myself, both at work and home. Who am I, and what can I give? It may surprise you, but when you spend weeks and weeks in intensive care looking helplessly at your son fight encephalitis, you ask these searching questions. And when you spend the next 3 years helping him dealing with his special needs and disabilities, you really ask what matters to yourself, and you ask what you can give to my wife, to my work, and to my family. Now, without wishing to sound almighty, I think to Stefan's point, I've been told I'm a little bit more conscious of who I am. Perhaps a little bit more resilient, a bit more compassionate. But as my wife will attest every single day, far, far from perfect. But I have to say, it's as though I've woken up, and whilst I hope I'm not going through a midlife crisis at the age of 40, it feels like I've got a new pair of eyes and ears on the world around me. And what I'm trying to do is translate my personal experience into my professional experience at work, into my role as a leader or an aspiring leader. So the central premise of what I want to talk about today is that every single one of us, whether we're disabled or not, has special needs, but very few leaders actually tap into them. So it's no wonder that actually engagement of people, employees at work, is at an all-time low in many organizations. A poll by Gallup showed that employee engagement around the world was 13%. 13%. So it's no wonder that we have a growth problem in many companies and many economies. Great leaders, smart leaders, create the conditions for which you and I feel comfortable sharing our answers to those two simple questions of who am I and what can I give? And I've been really struck in my personal experience over the last few years with other people coming to me in my own organization or the clients I work with, sharing their own stories of their own struggles at home, but themselves or their children. Now, perhaps I've asked more questions, perhaps I've listened more attentively, or perhaps I hope they felt more comfortable sharing how they think and feel. I've also heard fantastic stories of people around me who have skills and experiences outside work that they're not bringing into work. And don't tell me that somebody who's a great musician, an artist, a sports person, hasn't got something to offer at work. So I've learned a huge amount. But over the last, I guess, 20 years of working around the world, helping companies hopefully grow and grow successfully, too many leaders skip through these motivations, our own needs, in the rush to deliver the next project, the next milestone, the next set of financial results. I've certainly done it myself. But they don't tap into the capabilities, the true capabilities that we have. If you look at manufacturing, for example, our own estimates suggest that actually there's about 20% of untapped capacity in manufacturing. Imagine what that number is for ourselves as individuals, as humans. So when we talk about the sharing economy, we talk about hotels and cars and so on, why don't we actually start talking about ourselves? Why don't we share who we are and what we need, and what we want, and what we can give far more at work? So I actually think a central premise that underpins a lot of business is broken. Too many leaders are promoted and rewarded on the basis of process, bureaucracy, energy, power. And some of that, in some cases, is important. But what about potential? Why are leaders not actually trying to discover, inquire, be inquisitive, curious about who we are as individuals? They may come onto stages like this and say, oh yes, I'm the empowering leader, and do all those sorts of things. But it's like they describe a shiny new car. It looks really flash, it looks really fast, but actually when you get inside it, the engine doesn't quite work, and it doesn't feel as comfy as perhaps it's sold. So these are the people, and typically men, I have to say, and maybe me still, or in the past, the ones who sort of run around, they have 5 phones, they look really busy, they're red in the face, they expect people to follow them, and then they realize that actually that doesn't work. They're trying to squeeze the juice out of everybody to find that actually people don't want to follow. So let's take a typical day in many of our lives, whether in academia or in business, and ask yourself the question, how many of us spend time in our sweet spot? The sweet spot of who we are and what we want to give to what the organisation can provide. And I'm not naive enough to suggest that's an easy marriage. But one thing I've tried to do in my own organisation is introduce what we call a living and learning well contract. Now, I have to say that sounds very grand, and it's not. But rather than what we used to do, where you start a project and you talk about milestones and outputs and all that sort of stuff, which you still need to deliver, we actually talk about who we are, what we need, the things outside work that are important to us, how we want to work, some of the constraints, some of the things that are important to us. It may sound very obvious. I have to say, to many people it is. But what we found is that when people open up of who they are, we find that life and work is more enjoyable. We're a bit more flexible. And actually our projects are more successful, more profitable for the people and the organisations we work with. Now, this may all sound very obvious, I have to say, and indeed graduates get this and have said to me, well, why haven't we been doing this for years? But I've been sad to say that actually I've learnt things about people I've known for 5 to 10 years, about their lives and so on, by asking those 2 very simple questions that I should have done years ago. And it's like they're hiding behind a mask, hiding behind who they should be and leaving their true selves at the door when they walk into an office. It was interesting recently, I was giving a talk in front of about 800 new graduates in my own organisation. I thought it went okay-ish. Came off the stage, and a chap came up to me, he's probably in his 20s, early 20s, and came and said, I'd like to give you some feedback. Right? And that's great, that's exactly the culture I sort of like. I was, have to say, a bit daunted, shook his hand. He gave me a bit of positive feedback, and he gave me some developmental feedback, which, by the way, is a criticism. He asked some fantastic questions about me, very personal questions, not too personal. He gave a bit about himself, and by the time I could actually sit down, he'd sent me a link to his LinkedIn profile, and so on and so forth. It was natural. He felt open that he could give himself to me, and he put himself forward. Now, what happens when you're 5 to 10 to 15 years into a career? Why is it that you stop asking questions of yourself? Why is it you stop asking questions of others? It's like you're too proud. It's like you have to be the hero leader. Well, actually, I think there's a new breed of leader that actually has a bit more humility, a bit more openness, a bit more courage to ask more questions of other people. That's my hope. That's what I'm observing, more and more. And I think what I'm also seeing is that people are asking questions about how they want to spend their life at work. At any estimates, we're likely to spend 80 to 100,000 hours at work during our lives. Just take that in. Now, my hunch is when you retire, whatever age, that actually you're not going to look back and say, you know what, I wished I worked a bit harder, right? You might have asked, why wasn't I myself at work? Why didn't I share what I want, share who I am, share what I can give to others in order to have more fun at work, give more at work? That wouldn't surprise me. Now, I have to say, I was a bit of a modelling geek. I hasten to say that, actually, Belinda. I've got my Megadeth T-shirts and pizza boxes still at home. But it's interesting, the coding and modelling process is one that actually we could apply in this context. I was told that great modelers and coders spend a lot of time in the discovery phase, understanding what a model needs to deliver, what the requirements are, how you design, scope, and build it. You only build at the latter stages, right? That's what I've been taught. And then you actually test to see if it works. So why actually, in our daily lives, do we rush into the process of delivering? Why don't we spend more time early on in a project, an organisation, sharing what we need, what we can deliver, and so on? Why do we rush to just the process of just doing? We're surely missing out many tricks in that process. Now, I have to say, in my own life, I've learned a lot by being a bit more open myself. I definitely went through had a mask on, having spent months and months in different hospitals, trying to look after my son and my wife, who genuinely is the hero around here. I came into my office, often spending nights overnight in the hospital, and then coming back into the office trying to be the same person. There were a few people who noticed, many people who didn't. I was looking tired, pretty gaunt, And then I decided, actually, enough was enough. I am selectively and carefully and privately, until now, going to share some of that experience. And actually, it was like a weight off my shoulders. I could be myself. And actually, I realized there's quite a lot of my personal experience that I could bring into my professional experience. And I want to share a few examples of that. My wife, Saloni, and myself, we have a pretty clear purpose for my son, Sachin. By the way, the word Sachin means purity in Sanskrit. I think it's a great word. We didn't name him after the cricketer, by the way, which is the common suggestion. We have a clear purpose. We want him to live a healthy, happy, independent life, which is free of seizures. He has epilepsy. It's pretty clear. We're pretty ruthless about what we need to do, and we're pretty ruthless about things that get in the way. So if something's working, we'll go with it. If something's not working, we won't, and we'll change course. That clarity of purpose I see in some organizations too. We just heard about it in terms of some conscious organizations. However, there's quite a lot of lazy ones that actually don't have a purpose, and they're the ones just waiting to be disrupted. The second thing we've learned is to play to my son's strengths. He's a fantastic runner. He runs faster than anyone. He has a brilliant smile, happiness and affection you couldn't believe if you spent so much time in hospital and you've had medicines all throughout your body. He spins round faster than anybody. How many people here do you think could spin around 10 times and not fall over? Now, some would say that's a medical issue, and it is, right? But it's an incredible strength. Glass half full. The interesting thing, we try and look through his life through a strengths lens. So we look for environments, we look for people who get him, love him as much as we do. So Hannah at our local children's centre doesn't give him a label, doesn't call him a special needs child, just gives him a hug, assumes he can do everything. We put him in big open spaces like parks so he can run around. Crowded spaces like the birthday parties for kids are a no-go. They don't really work. And we avoid the people who take their kids away, who stare at him, or take their kids away because they think that their kid will get something from him, which still happens, can you believe it? Or they don't like the fact that he may give them a hug. I didn't think a hug was a bad thing, by the way, did you? I didn't think brain damage was contagious, did you? And it's interesting how we are ruthless about focusing on his strengths and finding environments that play to his strengths. And I think companies are beginning to too. There's a study by Tom Rath, which looks at organizations that play to the strengths of their individuals, and has shown that actually those organizations are up to 8 times more productive than the organizations that don't. We've also been very clear on what we can control and what we can't. Sadly, at the moment, I can't control his seizures. But I carry around a huge amount of guilt myself about what I could have done early in his life to stop encephalitis. It's completely irrational because there's nothing I can do. And there's nothing I can do sometimes when he has a drop seizure, which means his whole body stays still and he drops on the floor. There's nothing I can do. But you have to try and learn to deal with it. You have to try and learn to deal with these grey swans, as they're called. These are events that will happen. They're not predictable, but you have to try and find a way to cope with it. And it's interesting, some of the organizations I work with, they try and find that way to cope in a world where actually there's lots of things they can't control. We've also pretty pragmatic, or we've learned to be more pragmatic about our aspirations for him. He may, and I emphasize may because we're going to give it every shot, he may not lead the life many other children may lead. So he may not go to the same schools or universities. We can't participate in the conversations with the parents who say, yes, they're doing X, Y, and Z in nursery, or they're going to go to this top university, because brain damage is irreversible. So we're pretty pragmatic, but we're also careful about not looking too far ahead. It gets scary when you look at scenarios for children with disabilities or special needs if you look too far ahead. So what we try and do is celebrate every special moment. When he has a few hours, when he doesn't have a seizure, when he looks us in the eye for the first time, and then when he repeats what we do, you grab on those special moments, and you put the bad ones in a little box, and you lock it. Yeah? The other thing I've learned is something about presence. I know that's a topic that many people look at, especially in boardrooms, where many executives are on their phones, looking very important, doing lots of things, but actually they're only in about a tenth of the meeting. Presence for us is a necessity, not one of these fads. When Sachin has his drop seizure, so imagine you're in drama, going back to drama class at school. You look as though you're going to fling yourself off the stage to your friends who's going to catch you. If you have epilepsy and you have a drop seizure, there's nobody to catch you. It's pretty unpredictable. So we actually have to be very present. There's no time for me at the weekends to look at my phone and do other things. You have to watch him literally side by side to make sure you manage his seizures. And of course, I get it wrong. Right? There's times I have got it wrong, so he's got chipped teeth, bruises, and so forth. But it's taught me something about trying to be a bit more present at work and a bit more present with those around me from that experience. Now, many leaders, far more impressive than me, are actually talking openly about their disabilities or the disabilities of their children. Richard Branson has talked about his dyslexia. Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO, has 2 special needs children. And Anne Sherry, the CEO of Carnival Australia, talks about her experience of bringing up her son with Down syndrome. I'm guessing they're doing that for a similar reason to me, in terms of, if you like, giving the conditions for which other people can be open about their own lives in a work environment. But I think many leaders have got a long way to go. They're only tapping into a fraction of the diversity we need in their own organizations. We talk about race and gender, and there clearly is a long way to go in embracing an environment that promotes more equality and more openness. But I'm talking about a diversity of talent, where actually we can be more open about who we are and how we want to be in our work environment. So when we look around us, let's not label, let's not assume, let's not marginalize people who are different. Let's bring a greater sense of curiosity into our world. Let's ask more questions of each other. Let's ask what matters. Let's ask what we can give. Let's ask what we value. And my sense is, by asking those simple questions and creating the environment in which we feel open enough and courageous enough to give our answers, that actually we'll start tapping into our true potential. We'll actually start having organizations that can grow more. We won't have the productivity issues that belabours many of the companies around, particularly the developed world. I don't think it's that hard. As Belinda said, I think it's some very small things we need to do. Ask yourself the question, who am I and what can I give? And my hunch is that's a more inspirational form of leadership. And my hunch is, I think it's worth a go, don't you? That's what I wanted to say today.